All right, before we get started, I just got to point out, before I do the whole, let's get this thing kicked off, is I've been looking forward to this panel, this conversation for a really long time, because I have been geeking out on this technology and the idea of, how do we solve the world's biggest problems for such a long time. And so before we get started, before we dive into this, I just want to thank both of you for being here tonight, because I think this is just fascinating stuff.
Thank you.
And it's a really great topic. So let's just go ahead and dive into this. This episode of the Disruption Lab is taped in front of a live studio audience. To both of you, the phrase nuclear is having a moment is getting thrown around a lot right now. From where each one of you sits, one actually inside a reactor company, one inside the academic program that's actually going to, train the people who will run them. What's actually structurally changed, and what would have to be true for this not to be the time, this not to be, a different version of the story than we've heard in the past?
So I'll start. So the first thing is that, at least at K-State, we've initiated some new academic programs around nuclear engineering, really more of a revitalization of a former academic program. We had one of the first bachelor's degrees in the country in nuclear engineering. And a few years ago, we had a lot of students who were kind of asking us, we have this thing that's kind of like a minor, why don't we have a full degree? And for a long time, the faculty really thought that we didn't have the resources, the people to make it happen. We took another look at the requirements from the accrediting body and realized that we could actually do it. And so structurally, what that means for us is that now we have a new major to offer in this field that's in incredibly high demand. The second big thing from a university perspective is obviously funding. You've got to have strong support from the state, strong support from federal helps as well. And we've been fortunate enough in Kansas to get support from the state legislature, some directed funding that will help us bring our program up to where it really should be to serve the number of students who are clamoring for this degree. So I think those two things are really sort of the big changes that are happening from a university front.
And then Jason, how about you, from an industry perspective, what's changed this time that's going to make this the time?
So I think, to me, what's driving all of this right now is just technology. It's AI, it's data centers that they demand so much electricity, and everybody wants to use them. They're very useful tools, right? But that's just a new demand on our electricity generation. And I've seen kind of these false start nuclear renaissance in my career of 27 years, but we didn't have this. This demand for power. Data centers are extremely electricity hungry, and to me, that's what's really going to make this happen.
It's been interesting. So Jason Pottorff is with Deep Fission. You guys might have read about the work that they're doing that was announced in Parsons, Kansas. And Dr. Amir Bahadori is with K-State and has reinvigorated and, as he said, restarted the nuclear engineering program at K-State University. It feels like, we've been talking about the load on the grid for a few years, but it's been mostly around electrification of things. This is just a different demand cycle that seems to be pushing this thing to where we've got to find solutions. And so when you think about the industry side of this thing and you talk about the demand, what's the demand look like from a human resource perspective? I mean, I think you guys are one of several universities that have kind of all of a sudden jumped back into this with both feet. So from a forecasting perspective, what's this resource demand look like?
Yeah, so to meet the goals of the Department of Energy, and these goals that were really sort of formed over the past few presidential administrations, by 2050, we need to have 375,000 more workers in the nuclear power sector. That's not just nuclear engineers. We need more nuclear engineers, more mechanical engineers, civil, but we also need people in the trades that are able to actually build these facilities and to help maintain them. And also reactor operators are a big part of that as well, because currently You have to have at least one person operating each reactor during the time that it's generating power. So it's a tremendous number of people. It represents really like factors of numbers of people. We're talking about increasing the workforce by 3 to 4 times the current level.
Yeah, this isn't like a 25% gain. This is like a 4x kind of thing.
Right.
That we're
Yeah. It's hundreds of percent. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. Jason, I want to talk a little bit about the technology. So, Deep Fission's pitch is that the cheapest way to make nuclear safer and cheaper is to put it a mile underground.
Yep.
So for an audience that probably hasn't spent a ton of time, thinking about reactor design, walk us through why a borehole solves the problem that has been facing reactor design and some of the challenges we've read about historically over the years.
So yeah, if you look at a current large nuclear reactor, it's under very high pressure, kind of like you think about a pop can, shaking it up. You open that thing up, it's just going to all come out, right? That's what would happen with a large reactor. We are designing a very small reactor that we want to put a mile deep underground because we want a mile tall column of water sitting on top of it, because a mile tall column of water gives you the exact same pressure that you would find in a large pressurized water reactor. Can that water really go anywhere? No. We could never lose that pressure sitting on top of that reactor. So I should be able to make an argument that we will never uncover that fuel and melt fuel and potentially release it. And that's what you always have to evaluate in the design of nuclear power plants to ensure that you don't dose any of the public and that it's safe.
What's the scale difference between, I think we all have seen the pictures of what we would consider a traditional nuclear power plant. What's the output difference? What's the scale difference between what you're talking about and what we see in that traditional sense?
Our reactor is much smaller. Our target for power generation from one of our reactors is 15 megawatt electric. If you look at the large plant at Wolf Creek, it's about 1,250 megawatt electric, so much larger. So I think that's a benefit for our design. We could more easily decentralize if you want to provide power to a small community or some remote location. You don't have to build the large thing that you see down at Wolf Creek. Or if you want more power, let's just drill more boreholes and add more reactors and add capacity as needed.
We're talking about reactors, and I learned something today as I was prepping I learned a lot today as I was prepping for this panel. I just want to say that. But I did not realize, and I was talking to somebody who actually works close to this a few minutes ago, Eric Buda, you guys have a reactor on campus, and it's actually one of the larger research reactors. It's over a megawatt.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've had a reactor on K-State's campus since 1962, and a lot of people don't realize it. And I think that's a testament to just how safe it is and how well the university maintains the facility. So it's a very unique design. It's designed to basically shut itself down as the power increases. Basically, the way the materials are in the fuel is what gives us that effect. And it's so safe that we let undergrads operate it. We train them on it. I was one of those undergrads at one time, which is really sort of what drew me in. I don't know, Jason, if it was a similar story for you, but our reactor as well, it's not under pressure. And so it's an open pool reactor. You can literally look down at it while it's operating, see the blue glow that emanates from it. And that ability to connect in that way with like one of your physical senses, which is uncommon in the field of nuclear engineering, is really powerful. And one of the main things we do with our reactor is outreach. We give tours everywhere from grade school age children all the way up to my grandfather is going to be 94 this year, and he's toured the reactor multiple times. So it's just a great facility and really the crown jewel of our nuclear engineering program at K-State.
You talk about the safety aspect and the different types of architectures of these reactors and so on. I think there's a misconception out there that there's just like one engineering build of these things and it could go terribly wrong.
Yeah.
But there's different, there's like these SMRs, there's these different types of reactors that are being developed. Is that one of the technology pivot points that's really kind of driving this renaissance, if you will, of a 60, 70-year-old technology that's been kind of sitting waiting for its time?
I think so. I was just talking earlier before the session with one of the audience members about how nuclear, on any objective metric, is really one of the most efficient, one of the safest ways of generating power. But the one place that we failed historically is on construction costs. Other power sources, if you look at the cost per unit power with time, they've gone down, and with nuclear, it's gone up significantly. The reasons for that are very complex. It's part regulation, part the way that they're financed. But overall, there's a broad recognition in the industry that we have to get more cost effective with how we build these plants, and reducing the size, right sizing the regulations accordingly is really one of the major strategies that's being pursued in order to achieve the build out that we need.
When I think of, for both of you, there's a pattern in these advanced industries, right? The breakthrough technology arrives, people start to understand the absorption problem actually is where the challenges are, the supply chain, the workforce, the regulation, as you pointed out just now, the financing and things like public trust. Where in the stack is the absorption problem right now for what you guys are talking about and what you guys are doing?
To me, I think it's workforce. If we build these as fast as we would like to meet demand of electricity, it's going to be difficult, right? And I think that's kind of a combination of the perception, the history, the perception of nuclear in the past has been such that even like with events like Fukushima and 3 Mile Island, both of which no one died from the radioactive event that happened at those, but yet still everyone has that perception of nuclear is dangerous. And if you look back at the history of the industry, no one has died in our 60, 70 years. So that's kind of driven companies, supply chain companies in nuclear out of the US. And now we're having this ramp up of electricity demand, and it's kind of it's not a good situation.
Yeah. I mean, there's a timing problem right now.
So
for sure.
We really need what Amir's doing at K-State to.
Yeah, and I think the workforce development, we're doing as much as we can, as fast as we can, in order to educate these students. I do think that there are opportunities to mitigate that problem through the use of AI in order to hopefully kind of reduce the overall requirements of the numbers of people in order to achieve the build out that we want to achieve. From my perspective, one of the things that I've been involved heavily with is radiation risk communication. I'm not classically trained in that, but through my professional society, I've gotten the opportunity to really learn a lot about how you develop position statements regarding certain aspects of nuclear, but more importantly, how you can connect with the public to understand their concerns regarding nuclear, but then also more generally the use of radiological technologies. And I think the most important lesson learned that I've seen throughout history is that it can't be a one-way street, right? So it can't be us just like teaching and trying to address knowledge gaps. We really have to better understand what people's concerns are and to honestly address them and meet them where they are in terms of those concerns. That understanding is absolutely necessary in order to build trust and then to deliver the promise that we want to deliver through nuclear.
When I think about this as, we work with a lot of high growth startups. That's kind of one of the focus areas that we have as an organization. And I think I've never thought of this as a startup opportunity. There's been a few regulatory or changes based on, I think there was an executive order that maybe the ability to do this outside of a national lab or outside of, kind of that infrastructure, but then also a significant tranche of funding that has been kind of released through DOE. Does that open the door for more companies like Deep Fission to kind of get into this market and to, whether it's the small modular, the micro, the new, not very novel approaches to how you handle some of the construction issues? I mean, are we going to see an explosion in kind of novel ideas in this space?
Yeah, I think you're already seeing it. I mean, there are, it seems like I hear of a new company doing a new small or micro reactor design once every month. The demand for workforce for those companies is exploding right now, and it is driven by what you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, I think that there's sort of this healthy, almost like brainstorming activity in the field. There's certain companies that are further along the technology maturation scale, and I think that ultimately, in order to get the economics that we need to out of nuclear, there probably will be some consolidation, and certain designs will rise to the top. Be that from an economic perspective, a safety perspective. So it's sort of the natural cycle of technology where there are a lot of folks with ideas, and the best ideas are going to be the ones that last.
Speaking of best ideas, again, I learned a lot of new things today. You're going to hear me say this over and over again, unfortunately. There's all enriched uranium is not the same. So we talk about where are the constraints in the growth of this market. You guys at Deep Fission, you took a very, I think, interesting approach because it's with pressurized water and with the LEU, the type of it's not new in terms of the approach. The approach is that you're putting it in a mile deep.
That's right. Our approach was take what's tried and true and has been implemented for 50 years in the nuclear industry, and use that, marry that up with tried and true drilling technology, building boreholes, and then also geothermal energy, getting heat out of the ground and converting that to electricity. We're trying to marry those three things up. Keep it simple. Don't invent and use any of the new fancy nuclear fuels. Use stuff that we can buy today, right now.
By definition, innovation and not invention. Yeah, it's fascinating. Can you walk the layman through the difference between high assay, the different types of enriched uranium and where the constraint is? Because my understanding is what you guys are using, there's not really a market constraint, perhaps.
Yeah, so when we talk about enrichment of uranium, it's basically increasing the number of atoms of the uranium that are of a particular type. In the U.S., we use uranium instead of thorium for the fuel cycle for the most part, and uranium-235 is the type of uranium atom that you really want to have in your sample in order to basically to maximize the power output, for lack of a better word. So natural uranium comes in a flavor where about 0.7% of those atoms are uranium-235. In order to do a commercial power reactor, you have to enrich that or increase that proportion to about 3 to 5%. When we talk about high assay low enriched uranium, that's uranium that's been enriched further above that 5% level, more toward like a 20%, or a little less than 20% is typically where that dividing line is. This is important because, as you enrich the uranium to higher and higher levels, it becomes more of a concern from a non-proliferation perspective. So a lot of the conversation about what's going on currently in Iran is about 60% enriched uranium, which is essentially approaching what's called like weapons grade. So the enrichment process, it's actually an electrically hungry process. It's technology hungry, and so we want to try to use what we've got if we can. Some of the designs do require that. Our reactor at K-State actually uses what would be classified as HALEU, or high assay low enriched uranium, but designs that don't use that definitely have an advantage from a supply chain perspective when it comes to the fuel.
And this is one of those areas where things like embargoes, things like trade, like this impacts the supply we have, because I believe that the HALEU is not produced in the United States. There's not a lot of production of that in the United States. That's an imported
Yeah,
opportunity.
that's my understanding, and there's been recent legislation on restricting import of uranium from Russia, for instance.
Right.
But there certainly are other nations that we can acquire uranium from, Canada being one that has quite a bit. But yeah, I mean, if you can generate it domestically, right, and bring that supply chain within your borders, you have a lot more control over your ability to power your nation.
Jason, I want to talk a little bit about what you guys are doing in Parsons, and then maybe, Amir, I want to hear your perspective on the connectivity between what you're doing in Manhattan and what's happening in Parsons, because I think there's a lot more happening there than just what you guys are doing at Deep Fission. But for you guys, where are you at in the process? And what are kind of some of the gating factors for you guys to kind of continue to move this thing forward?
So we are we are a participant in the Reactor pilot project, which is a Department of Energy program. The goal of that project is to they would like to see at least 3 new reactor designs go critical by July 4th. I'll say that we likely will not meet that, but we are going to do what we can. We've selected a site in Parsons, right outside of Parsons, Kansas, and we have already drilled a mile-deep hole, and that hole was strictly so that we could know exactly what the geology looks like, so we can factor that into the design of our reactor. The next step for us is we are going to drill a larger hole, not quite as deep, so we can do some non-nuclear testing, make sure we know how to insert equipment like our reactor and other connected systems down hole, do some testing. Can we get heat out of the hole? But as part of the Reactor pilot project, we will eventually need to submit what's called a documented safety analysis. They require us to present our analysis of the safety of our reactor design, and they will need to approve that before we could then begin to try to take a reactor design of ours critical and then produce power with it.
And this is Department of Energy that would have to approve it?
That's right.
When you say they, that's who you're
Yeah.
talking about? Yeah. And so this is, when I heard about this in Parsons, Kansas, so I'm from Southwest Kansas, and so when I heard this was in Parsons, Kansas, I'm thinking some poor farmer's land has been picked for this, pilot or these tests and so on. But this is actually a former Army site or a current military site, I think even, still under the control of the U.S. military.
Yeah, it's a very large site. They used to make munitions at this site,
Army,
World
yes,
War
munitions
II
plant, yeah.
munitions plant, and so that site has been turned over to, it's a public-private entity, right? And so they are looking to bring new businesses to Parsons, and that was part of why we selected that location. And the geology was attractive for what we're trying to do.
And talk to me about maybe the connectivity between what you've got going on in Manhattan and what's happening down in Parsons now.
Yeah, so at K-State, we're a land grant institution. I think the first that was formed under the Morrill Land Grant Act. And so a lot of what we do, in fact, everything we do is really focused on applied learning. Within engineering, we have senior design classes that our students take, typically in their senior year. And we've got a project, I think one with Deep Fission right now, where students are actually getting to work with engineers at Deep Fission. And we work with a variety of companies, a variety of national labs. We really want to make clear that we're a resource for the people of Kansas and the greater Great Plains region when it comes to nuclear technology and nuclear power specifically. At K-State too, there's a big emphasis on solving problems that are important to people. If you look at the history of the Land Grant Act, a lot of it was about opportunity, increasing opportunity for people that needed that economic upward mobility, the ability to gain an education, to go out and to contribute to society, to better their lives, to better the lives of people around them. And energy is one of the areas of opportunity that we've identified as a key enabling technology. And so we're in the process of looking at ways to better collaborate across programs, to align our academic offerings, our engagement with industry around the theme of energy. And so I think there's going to be some exciting things that happen over the next year and even beyond in that vein.
When I think, so one thing I want to ask that I think is right, but I just want to make sure, you're a Dot kid, is that right?
Yep, I'm from Wyandotte County. Yep, went to Sumner Academy, if anybody knows where that is.
As if I was kind of going through the, what your background was, and I didn't realize you were from Wyandotte. That's very cool. Local kid doing good stuff. When I think about the Manhattan, Kansas City, Parsons kind of connectivity now, more engineers per capita than pretty much anywhere here in Kansas City, national security campus, and the focus on nuclear proliferation and some of the things on the Missouri side, and now what's happening in Parsons. Is this emerging as a kind of nuclear corridor, or am I misreading this?
I mean, I think it kind of looks like it, especially when you think about the engineering procurement services companies within the Kansas City region, Kiewit, Black & Veatch, Burns & Mac, all these companies have work in nuclear. K-State, we're kind of on the western frontier, if you will, on that. Parsons is emerging, and then Missouri as well. There's 2 universities in Missouri now that have nuclear programs. One in Rolla, Missouri University of Science and Technology, and then the University of Missouri is resurrecting theirs. And they actually have at University of Missouri the largest research reactor in the country. They do a lot of work around medical isotopes. So kind of that I-70, I-35 corridor. We're really the nexus of that, yeah.
Jason, I want to shift to the corporate side of this thing, the industry side of this thing. So when you guys scale gravity reactors, right? That's what the reactor's called. Mm-hmm. When you scale these, you've got multiple gravity reactors. You're talking about commercial deployment. Who builds them? Who licenses them? Who operates them? I assume these people are coming from your program or from engineers that maybe are the other types of engineering firms that you're talking about, and so on. Is the corporate side of this investing at the speed and scale that is necessary? I mean, we're talking about the workforce side of this thing, but are you seeing the commercial and private investment at the same rate and scale to make this happen?
I would say we have work to do there. Yeah, we are definitely going to do all that we can to train the next workforce that we're going to need. If we're successful with this reactor design, it is going to be much cheaper to build. And if we are successful at that, and we build the number of these that we think we will, we are going to need lots of people. And I would say right now, that it's not there. That supply of the workforce is not there.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback on that, a lot of the grant opportunities that are coming out now, they're requiring a substantial cost share, and the expectation on the part of the federal government is that cost share will come from commercial entities. So they really are wanting to see universities teaming with industry, teaming with the federal government kind of as the funding provider, but then also the expertise that will ultimately license these designs. So I think that's a realization that in order to really not have things stop at a point where they hit like the valley of death, where they're not going to ultimately be deployed, you have to have strong connections in industry, and then that will help to bridge that gap.
What's the graduate output that you're looking at right now for the program?
Yeah, so we just restarted it last fall. When we redesigned the curriculum, we designed it so that our students that were in the minor could easily transfer into the major. And so we had our first 3 students last fall. I anticipate that we'll have anywhere between 10 and 20 this spring. And the growth rate of the enrollment is really, it's been really surprising to me. We'll be probably at around 110 to 130 students this fall enrolled in the program. So steady state is really hard to judge right now because it is growing so much. But we'll see where the future takes us, I guess.
I gotta say, I love to hear that, because when I was in the program back in 99, 2000, there were really only 12 of us in the entire nuclear engineering program. I was the third to the last to get the straight nuclear before it went away, and now it's back, and the program is huge. So
Yeah, we've come a
we are
long way.
Things are definitely changing in the right direction. That's for sure.
Yeah, and this is I think, that tipping point of where we've had these false starts so many times with nuclear and its opportunity and its ability. It seems like it's not going back at this point in time.
Well, so I will say that I think pretty much everybody in the field is well aware of the fact that we're one accident away from going back. And so that safety culture, that sense of responsibility and stewardship is very strong. So, you never want to say it can never go back, because I think it definitely could. Public perception is really a huge driver of everything surrounding nuclear.
Yeah, public trust is what's held it back
Yeah.
all these years, right? That and a strong lobby from a different sector of the energy sector there. Let's talk a little bit about safety, because I was also amazed that as I was looking through this, you read about the 7 or 8 global accidents that have kind of defined the nuclear industry over the years. And as you pointed out, in the United States, there's been nothing that's really, created any death from this. And when you look at I think it's measured in death per megawatt hour on the energy lake, which I thought was fascinating. But this is like literally, I think, a notch above solar. Mm-hmm. At the very bottom of the list. Is that because it just hasn't scaled, or is it since it's measured that way, it's just safe?
It's because it's safe. So in the U.S., we get about 20% of our power from nuclear. The state of Kansas is right in line with that. I'm not sure what the statistics are on the state of Missouri. I would assume it's somewhat similar, but it is very safe. I think a lot of the perception really comes from unfamiliarity. As an engineer, when we think about risks, when we talk about risks, we really boil it down to likelihood and consequences. Very, I guess you could say very objective measures. But when people think about risk, they think about other aspects of it, including whether it's a choice that they make, whether they're familiar with it. You're a lot more familiar with like getting in your car and driving than you are, say, from risk from a nuclear power plant or from any type of radiation exposure. And so keeping those risks in perspective, helping to communicate those risks is super challenging. And I think that even far and above a lot of the more technical engineering challenges, that risk communication, risk perception is really kind of the pinnacle. It's the toughest problem.
Yeah, I'd just add, to me, it's all about perception. People hear nuclear and they think it's not safe, right? But I always point people to look at what happened at 3 Mile Island. They had an event. They melted 2/3 of their core down, but they had a containment building that was required by law in the design. And because of that containment building, no one died. No one got hurt from that event. And yet it's the one thing that everybody points to: nuclear isn't safe. No, it is safe by design, by regulation, and no one was hurt from it. If that were to happen in any other industry, nobody would be afraid of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you just go through, I was looking at this today, and it was fascinating when you go through the number of natural gas explosions and oil explosions. I mean, you go through the deaths from fossil fuels. It's just like why we're not afraid of the production of that.
Yeah.
Where you have something I did not realize. Anybody else show of hands? Anybody know Kansas got 20% of their power from nuclear today? Yeah, I mean, that's fascinating to me, and considering that it's that safe, and you don't hear about it. Like I think there's a lot of people wouldn't even know there's nuclear power available in the state of Kansas, right? The average person.
Yeah, and one of the amazing things is really, you do have a high capital cost, but like Wolf Creek has been operating for more than 40 years safely. They got a 20-year license extension out to 60 years. And they're already talking about extending that license another 20 years to 80 years. So high capital cost up front, but very reliable after that.
I think I know what your answer is going to be, but I'm going to ask anyway to both of you. What's the thing that excites you most about where this is at right now and where this is going to be in 5 years?
what excites me the most, I think, is working on a design. I worked at NuScale Power for 10 years from the very beginning. Helped design that very safe reactor, but it's much larger, more complex, and much more expensive to build than what we're designing here. And that's what excites me, is these new passively safe designs that should be much cheaper to build. That's what excites me, that we're actually gonna deliver on this renaissance this time.
So two things. First, I think that, you know, it's obvious that in the United States we have a power-hungry society, and we need to help to meet that. But I do think there's great potential for deployment worldwide to really lift people up and to give them the electrical power that they need in order to have sort of the general power to improve their lives. The second thing is that there are always unforeseen spin-off good things that happen from technology development. Now, there can be bad things, right? And as engineers, it's our job to try to minimize those bad things and maximize the good things. But out of nuclear, historically came the use of radioactive isotopes for medical treatments. And so I see a lot of potential there for us to, you know, build on that record of, you know, going all the way back to Dwight Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace speech, like literally atoms for peace and atoms for improving people's lives, not only from power production, but in other areas as well.
Yeah, the demand on this isn't going anywhere. I mean, AI, you know, everybody likes to talk about is AI here. I mean, it's not going anywhere. The demand side of this equation is absolutely going up, and it's not going to plateau at any point in time in the near future. You talk about those innovations. I think there's a lot of conversations right now about how AI is going to take jobs away, but here we see this whole field of employment opportunity and this whole, you know, growth sector for students. What kind of marketing challenge do you have in getting students to, I mean, it doesn't sound like you've got much of a marketing challenge with the growth that you're seeing right now, but what are some of the factors that go into that versus maybe a typical trades kind of position or a typical engineering kind of role?
Yeah, so I think at K-State, what we do is we try to teach students the skills that they need to learn how to go through the process of thinking, right? We can teach facts, and facts over time change as we add to the body of knowledge. And facts are something that, like, you know, you can pick out your cell phone and like just Google something now. You don't have to necessarily memorize everything. But if you teach people the process of thinking, then they make themselves completely invaluable. They are just completely indisposable. And so that's one of the things that we try to emphasize in our program. What we try to emphasize university-wide is you've got these new tools that there's always going to be a new tool on the horizon, right? Something else that has the potential to take a job away. But if you learn how to leverage that tool to make your job more efficient, and then if you use that time then to build upon yourself and to learn how to be more and more of a contributor, then you will never be out of style.
And Jason, you mentioned this when we started, you know, 27 years in this industry, I think most on the instrumentation infrastructure, you know, side of this business. Where do you see aside from what you guys are doing specifically, where do you see the opportunities for innovation that still exist, and where you see some of these maybe ancillary or tangential opportunities for industry growth that might come from this?
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely in instrumentation. You know, half of my career is focused on nuclear instrumentation safety. All of my career is all about safety, you know, analyzing plants, you know, what are the worst case scenario accidents, and how do you design your plant to be able to handle those effectively. But certainly instrumentation, especially for our design, and this ties into what Amir was just talking about, you know, our senior design project that we worked with. We asked a set of students, you know, to, you know, take an independent look, and because K-State has a great neutron instrumentation program that they've built up there. We asked them, hey, take an independent look and look at all the fancy new technologies that have been developed at K-State over the past couple of decades, and try to come up with a a better, simpler, cheaper way to detect neutrons for a reactor. So, but I think those kinds of areas are areas where there's plenty of room for innovation and new development to support what we're trying to do.
Outside of public trust, what's the one thing that you wish more people understood, or the thing that people get wrong about this moment that we're in right now, whether it's investors, civic leaders, technologists?
You can start. I'm still thinking.
Yeah,
It's a
I
tough
am
one.
I said I wasn't trying to stump you. I really wasn't.
The one thing outside of public trust.
Yeah, what's the one thing you think folks are getting wrong? Like,
So I think that you can fool yourself into thinking that you have a foolproof design, right? And you really never know until you build it. There's been a lot of foolproof designs throughout history. And so, the spirit of what's being done with a lot of these advanced reactor designs, and emphasis on passive safety, I think is really great, and it's the right direction, but you don't know what you don't know. And so I think that we have to keep that capacity to deal with things that may be a little bit outside of what we predicted might happen, and be prepared to deal with those and to deal with them quickly within the nuclear industry.
it feels to me when you say that, I hear, and again, going back to dealing with a lot of earlier stage companies, this idea of needing to have the capital, especially this is a capital intensive thing you're talking about. So needing to have the capital to be able to do some of that testing and some of that experimentation. It can't all happen at universities and research labs. Some of it's got to happen in the market. Is that something that investors are going to have to build, like a different kind of tolerance? I mean, there was climate tech investing for a long time, and they're like, ooh, this isn't exactly what we thought, but now it's kind of coming back. Are we going to hit this investment cycle and this opportunity for investors to better realize what the opportunity is here in this market, I guess, for you guys?
I think we're already seeing that, just our company alone, let alone all of the other new small reactor development companies. You're seeing the financial industry and big players that haven't been heavily investing in nuclear for decades and decades, and you're seeing them getting interested now. Yeah, it's happening now.
Are these the traditional players in the energy space that are now starting to invest in this, or are these new?
These are, to me, these
venture?
are new.
Okay, I got you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I was just going to draw the comparison to what's being seen with the space program. So, you think about like these companies, Blue Origin out of Amazon, SpaceX, they're starting to really branch out into public financing. And so I don't think it's completely without precedent that that investors are having a little bit more of a risk tolerance, so that way they can, from their perspective, they want to gain greater reward when it does succeed. And so there seems to be like just a perspective shift within the financial industry on what they're willing to invest in.
So fast forward 5 years from now, 2031, what's the U.S. output in megawatt hours? And what was the unlock that got us there?
So right now we're at like 100 gigawatt-ish capacity. 2031 is pretty close when you talk about building a nuclear reactor. So by that time, I would imagine that there may be, I don't know, less than 5. I would be willing to bet less than 5 new plants that have started up. So not like a massive increase, but I think that once those plants are started up and are showing that return, that it will snowball into that 300 gigawatt by 2050.
So 2050 is kind of the industry mark that everybody's kind of set for this thing.
That's where the federal government has set that really as the benchmark, the Department of Energy. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like AI output, the demand is not going to wait.
Yeah. To me, that's part of the challenge, right? Typically for a new typical PWR design, to do the design and get it approved by the regulator, it's a 5 to 15 year process. I mean, it's very difficult. The regulations are pretty steep. My hope is that if we, our timeline, we're targeting proving that we can make one of our designs work by that 2031 timeframe. And if we're successful, to me, after that, it will just take off.
Because once you know it works, it scales fast because of the approach that you guys are taking. Yeah. And so the unlock here, if I read the room on that one, is what we've seen really from that executive order to kind of unlock, and then the regulatory softening maybe, and then the DOE like the government investment in this is really what's going to kind of be this unlock. Am I?
Yeah, I think so. Regulations have like historically been the whipping boy when it comes to nuclear deployment. Like, why haven't you deployed? Well, it's because of regulations. And I think that it's more complicated than that. So I do worry that some people are taking a little too simplistic of a view that if you just like try to flip a switch, that all of a sudden this will happen, because you can actually reverse public sentiment, by doing that kind of thing. I think that it's going to take all hands on deck in all areas, like workforce development being a huge part of it, like we talked about, financial sector being willing to invest, and then smart regulation, right? So taking processes that are just like not working right now in terms of being nothing more than being used for delay tactics, and shortening those, that makes sense. But wholesale, single-sided, broad scale, just reduction of regulation, I don't think is going to get you there, and I think it's counterproductive.
Yeah, I would add, you mentioned, softening regulation. I don't think what these executive orders, they aren't changing regulation. There's still the laws, and we all want to make sure that this is safe. To me, the thing we need to do is change that perspective of, a lot of people have the idea that any kind of radiation is harmful or bad for them. But the reality is we are bathed in radiation every time, every second of the day, right? And so just changing that mindset, I think, will go a long ways to doing what we're trying to do quicker.
So last set of questions, I want to talk about where the U.S. sits in this ecosystem. So I read an article, and I don't know, you never know what you can believe when you read these things these days, but there was, I think it came out of France, where they were talking about a different type of construction or a different type of approach where it actually consumes nuclear waste. Like the output is not what we would consider traditional nuclear waste. It made me think, well, where does the United States, in terms of some of the innovation we're talking about, stand in this global market of innovation and nuclear growth and those types of things? What's your guys' perspective on where we stand?
So from the fuel cycle perspective, we take a wasteful view of things. We do a once through fuel cycle. So once those fuel rods are burned in the core, they're taken out, they're stored in various ways, and ultimately the Department of Energy is responsible for taking all of that spent nuclear fuel and putting it in a national repository, which just doesn't exist yet. There are efforts underway to incentivize different states to build what are called nuclear life cycle campuses, which would involve reprocessing and exploring other storage and disposal techniques. But the U.S., when it comes to the nuclear fuel cycle, is, in my opinion, not the leader. Countries like France are really more on the cutting edge of that.
And on the reactor innovation side, how do you think? I mean, is the Silicon Valley power and the power? I think you guys are out of Berkeley, right? Is the power of innovation in the United States something that's kind of leaning into this opportunity and something that's going to keep us on the forefront of innovation from that perspective as well?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I was just going to say the U.S. system of allowing companies the flexibility to try things, right, with a safe approach, but some again are going to fail, some are going to succeed, and that's our way of doing things working. Other companies are a lot more prescriptive with what designs, or other countries, are a lot more prescriptive with what designs they build, and so they can deploy faster, but they're not necessarily deploying the best design faster.
Well, gentlemen, thank you both for being here tonight. Thank you both for sharing kind of this perspective. I think this is a fascinating space, emerging space. I think regionally, I don't know that we're paying as much attention to it as, you know, as we should or could be, because there's a lot of exciting things going on, and there's a lot of the ingredients that can make, again, as we talked about, this a very interesting region for the work that you guys are doing. So again, thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing the stories. You know, Jason, would love to have you back as you guys get a little further down the path and we, you know, get closer to where you guys are at, you know, criticality, as they say. And then Amir, would love to have you back and talk about the growth of the program and kind of the connection to all of the cool things that are happening down in Parsons as well.
Thank you.
Yep, my pleasure.
Thanks, guys. Give them a hand, everybody.